Ordinarily, I would have a cup of tea. I love tea. But there's load shedding. If you don't know what load shedding is, consider yourself a very lucky individual. Also, if you hear a lawnmower outside, I obviously cannot tell them to not mow the lawn. So hopefully my voice projects enough that it doesn't become a distraction. So today I thought we would talk a little bit about, at its core, what is therapy, who is it for, and also a little bit about trying to find the right fit. It's possible that this might end up being continued in a different video just because there's a lot to it. But I think that it can be really important to share with folks, and I do this a lot in my first session with folks, is to ask what they think therapy is, what they think is supposed to happen in the space, just so I can create a little bit of comfort around what is supposed to happen. So therapy in itself serves a different purpose for different people. I think as Black folks, and particularly in countries where mental health is not really a big part of the conversation, we tend to think that therapy is for people who experience really severe mental illness. And at that point, when someone is experiencing severe mental illness, there was a point where they weren't, right? So often when we think it's necessary is when it's at the very, very severe end of it, and it can feel really difficult to know what it's for, and it can also make therapy feel like a really scary experience, especially if you don't think you're suffering with severe depression or suicidal thoughts, right? So I want to start by kind of expanding the definition of therapy, that there's more to therapy than just addressing depression, anxiety, the severity of those things, suicidal thoughts, homicidal thoughts, all of these different things. Really, I want this video to make you less scared of the process. So I think a lot in the Black community, we have this narrative of wanting to keep our stories our own. And that's really important and understandable. Considering our history with the medical system, it makes a lot of sense that we've learned for a very long time to hold our stories inside of ourselves. And so when someone does push through that fear or discomfort around going to therapy, and they do go, they end up feeling really pressured to share everything. Share all of their deepest, darkest secrets, because that is what we think therapy is about. Or in some ways even trying to conjure up maybe a reason to be there. And I want to help us take a breath in that department and hold that therapy doesn't have to be that. That for one, it's important that you find a therapist that you're comfortable with. Not every therapist, psychologist, counselor, social worker is going to be the right fit, particularly when it comes to engaging in psychotherapy. You want to hold that you feel comfortable with that person. Sometimes it can take time to build that comfort, and other times it might just be that you don't fit with that person. And usually we don't think about fit as being an important part of the process, because at the end of the day, you as a person sitting in the chair are the most important part, right? But you, the person sitting in the chair, also has to be comfortable enough to share all of the things that you want to share. And also that your therapist should not be forcing you to share certain things. At least in my space, I tend to ask folks about their experience with therapy. Have they been in therapy before? What has their experience been like? And also what their ideas about therapy were before coming to the space. And often I will hear the piece about like, well, if something is like incredibly seriously wrong with you, that's when you go. And I want to hold that that's not always true. In fact, we might not get to the very seriously wrong if you go beforehand, because we know inside of ourselves when we're uncomfortable, when our bodies need time and space to adapt or need different things to build comfort. And so if you follow me on Instagram, I've been talking recently about this, I'm gonna use the word symbiotic, but I don't actually know if that's the correct word. Doesn't matter, you'll know what I mean. This symbiotic relationship between your mind, your body, right? That there is this lack of familiarity with our discomfort cues, right? We want to think that, okay, my body is going through something when I am in absolute distress, right? That if I've been in a car accident, or if I'm crying, or if there is some very intense thing that has taken over my body, that is when I address the discomfort. And therapy is a place where you can learn how to notice those smaller cues that you're uncomfortable, that you need different accommodations, or even that you just need a little bit more time. And that's a huge part of having enriching relationships with people as well, which is a lot of what I do, right? My work specifically, I don't necessarily work on the very, very end of the spectrum. I have experience doing it, I can do it, but a lot of my work focuses on building self-awareness. It focuses on understanding the relationship between your mind and body, getting more acquainted with our internal cues that tell us where we stand in the world, that make us feel comfortable enough to exist in our relationships and in relationship with ourselves, right? And so when it comes to who needs therapy, there is a much, much wider spectrum. There doesn't necessarily have to be something wrong with you to need therapy. And again, there is nothing wrong with people who have experienced severe mental health. And I think that that's the part about it that becomes really difficult, is that we want to create these barriers for this is healthy and this is not. This is right and this is wrong. And those are the things that keep us out of learning about ourselves. They keep us away from building that sense of self-awareness that helps us exist more fully in ourselves and in our relationships. So when it comes to who needs it, I would posit everyone. When it comes to who do you pick, that's the part that becomes a little bit more tricky. Not every therapist is going to address your issues in a way that kind of makes you feel heard, and that might not necessarily be because of the person. So I want you to think about, when you meet a new person, what are some of the traits that someone who you feel like you gel with, quote unquote, has? Are they really kind? Do you kind of gravitate to more quiet people? Are you someone who's really sarcastic? Do you thrive in spaces where there's a lot of social interaction, where there's a lot of energy happening, right? Because therapists are also people. We have our own personalities and we exist in different spaces as well. And so in addition to the specialties of each person, right, because there are different kinds of therapy, there are also different people in therapists. And if that person doesn't gel with you, it is not at all a reflection of therapy as a whole. I want to encourage you to try again. Try with someone else. See if it was the technique that the person used, or if it maybe was just that they're someone who uses a lot of jargon and jargon doesn't really sit well with you, or there's someone who likes to give a lot of quick tips and that's something that doesn't gel with you, because it might gel with somebody else. I'm someone who loves to talk about stories, about narratives, about what is the story that you tell yourself about yourself? What is the story that you tell yourself about the people in your life and how they exist in your world, right? I'm someone who talks about childhood a lot. And this, again, is technique more than it is my personality, right? I'm a pretty quiet person, but I love to be in spaces. I think I gel a lot with people who are quiet and people who need a lot more energy in the therapy space. And that is something that may or may not gel with you. So I want to hold that if you take anything from this video, therapy is important. regardless of what you have that you'd like to share, that severity of what's going on is not the thing that tells you that you should be in therapy. Discomfort, honestly, is enough, or even just the desire to learn more about yourself is enough. And also, thirdly, that you're not gonna gel with every therapist, and that is not a reflection of therapy as a whole. I want to say look out for a part 2 where I talk a little bit about different types of therapy and give just a little bit of an overview of what might be helpful for you to ask a therapist in a session to try and figure out if this is someone that you gel with or someone who is addressing what you need. Thanks so much. If you are not already, please be sure to follow me on Instagram. I think I'm on TikTok. I will put all of that information in the, what do people say on YouTube? The comments, the description box below. And hopefully I'll see you again. If you're interested in seeing me as a client, if you are a business looking for consultation around mental health, all of that information as well is in the description box.